Hello everyone. The video camera market is rough right now. Prices are up and availability is down. So now more than ever, people are looking for worthwhile, cheap, and actually available options. This is the cheapest camcorder I used in my recent night vision camera test. It is currently $60 on Amazon. Initially, it seemed like it might represent a better value than some other generic camcorders if you really just want the cheapest camera to record video. So I decided to do a more thorough review. I won't go into the night vision performance in this video. You can check out my night vision comparison video if you're interested in how it stacks up in terms of IR night vision performance. There is a link in the description. But first of all, let's get started with why I thought this might be a good value. Sure, it seems similar to most of these generic camcorders in that it has a fixed focus lens with no optical zoom, it has no image stabilization of any kind, and it has only very basic features and settings. But it seemed to record in a usable frame rate that would actually show up as usable in my editing software. It also has 1080p video at 30 frames per second and even 60 frames per second. Granted, like most of these cameras, it is over-sharpened with all the artifacts that brings along with it, while also lacking detail and looking like upscaled maybe from 480p. So it's poor quality 1080p, but it is better than some in this price range. It also has far from great, but far from the worst IR night vision performance I've seen. The interface also seems a bit different and more modern than what most of these generic camcorders have. So far, it might not sound all that great, but for $60, not too bad. Unfortunately, it's pretty much all downhill from there. The interface is clearly designed for a touchscreen, which this camera does not have. You can use the up, down, mode, and OK buttons to kind of navigate through the menus, but it is a little bit clunky. And there are often on-screen options and controls that simply do nothing. Even still, for $60, I'm not overly bothered by that, but audio is nearly as bad as it comes on these cameras. Audio quality isn't quite as bad as the horribly aggressive noise-canceled audio that some Ordros have, but it is recorded at a 16 kilobit per second data rate, which is very low, and only 8 kilohertz sample rate, which is also very low, so it's not great. It also ends up 4 to 5 seconds out of sync with the video. The first 4 or 5 seconds is actually cut off, and the audio starts there with the bit missing, and the rest ends up way ahead of the video, so what you're hearing is always 4 or 5 seconds ahead of what you're seeing in the video. You also can't adjust audio levels or even see the audio level to know what you're getting until after the fact when you listen to it back. All this means that despite the fact that this camera has an audio input jack, you really aren't gaining that much when the recording quality is so poor. Here's some video from my booth with this camera, and I'm currently using the internal microphones. And just to show how out of sync the audio is, if I tap this on the desk, you should be able to see just how far from what I'm actually saying and the sounds I'm making that tapping on the desk actually was. Alright, now just another short clip. Once again recording outside, but this time I have the Sennheiser MKE 600 microphone plugged into the audio input for this camcorder. And I have the white balance set to auto. It's still not perfect, which is why I tried the cloudy white balance before. I also tried the sunny, which was even worse. Just made everything super red. This white balance the auto white balance is a little bit better. It's not too bad right now, although it looks a little bit cool. And it occasionally has a tendency to just add too much red or kind of magenta to the color. But overall, it is definitely better than the sunny or cloudy or basically any of the other presets. And just as a point of comparison, this is how the Sennheiser MKE 600 sounds recording into a different camera, just to show you that any issues with the sound quality, it was coming from the camera itself, not the microphone. So it just goes to show that even connecting a good quality microphone into that $70 camera doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get good audio. Just a point of comparison. Originally, I planned to show some clips with audio recorded outside using the built-in mics as well, but I don't have the rest of those clips due to a host of issues with this camera. Overall, it's probably the glitchiest camera I've ever used. I've had it show that it was recording, but not actually record anything. Once, when I recorded a video, rather than showing up at the end of the file list, it showed up in the middle with a file number that I know was a different clip that I had recorded a short time ago. It had actually overwritten the previous file, which was then simply gone. I also had some videos that I know I recorded because I watched them back on the camera simply not show up on the card when I got home. I also had issues multiple times where the camera simply refused to start recording. I would press the record button and absolutely nothing would happen. Sometimes if I simply waited a bit, it would start letting me record, and sometimes it just wouldn't record at all until I turned it off and back on. Sometimes after trying to get it to start recording and it didn't show that it started recording, I would find like a 2-second video on the card later, so it must have started and then stopped recording, but it didn't give me any indication it had done so. Once when I tried to zoom in, the camera just froze up, and even though it was recording, the screen just stopped, everything froze. Eventually it kind of started working again, but it was then stuck at full zoom and wouldn't zoom back out. Partly because of all these issues, I tried multiple memory cards with this camera, all brand name cards that I confirmed had zero problems in other cameras, and formatting the cards in this camera is just not reliable. Once I formatted a card and all the files were still there afterward. Other times it would seem to format the card, but it would simply disappear from the camera and it wouldn't work, wouldn't record, wouldn't recognize the card until I removed and reinstalled it. Once the camera simply hard locked when I tried to format a card, and I actually had to remove the battery to get the camera to even turn off. Another annoying thing about this camera is that the battery seems to drain while the camera is off faster than most cameras. Even after just a week or so, the battery will be so dead the camera won't even turn on. It seems like every time I pick this thing up after it's been sitting for more than a couple days, it's dead. There are very few options to change to affect actual image quality, exposure, anything like that. Just very basic stuff. I did test different white balance settings outside, but those clips disappeared from the card. I know they were there because I watched them back on the camera before I left the park, but they were not on the card when I got home. Overall, it is the most problematic, unreliable camera I've ever used. And that's on top of the poor audio and image quality that honestly does pretty much go expected for a $60 camera like this. I didn't really use the audio for any of the clips during the night vision testing, so I didn't notice how out of sync it was. I did have a couple of glitches while I was making that video, but nothing nearly as bad as what started showing up when I started using it more. I had originally planned to explore the functionality of this camera more, but I just got so frustrated at the wasted time from all the issues and lost clips that I just decided to cut my losses. From the video and audio samples I've shown so far, you may or may not feel that the results are worth $60, but with the high price and low availability of good camcorders, I had really hoped that I'd found a worthwhile option that I could recommend for somebody just looking for the cheapest option. Unfortunately, despite the low cost, I can't recommend this camera due to the constant problems I had. But hopefully I've given you enough info to make your decision one way or another. If you have any questions, let me know. As always, thanks for watching. Take care.